and extraordinary power. Man-made mountains, dismembered bodies, millions of people buried alive. This is the story of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. One of the most powerful and ruthless rulers in history. What you might see now is an ordinary mountain, covered in trees and seemingly meaningless from the outside. But beneath this hill lies a deep secret, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, who was obsessed with immortality. The tomb, built to be 4 times larger than the Great Pyramid of Egypt at the time, is beyond imagination. The tomb was designed like a palace, with a ceiling adorned with stars. Inside, rivers of mercury flowed, representing oceans and reflecting the stars above, creating a visual feast. In different chambers, the bones of dozens of concubines, who were forced to drink poison and die, along with their clothes and personal belongings, were discovered. However, what makes the tomb famous is none of these things. While continuing their excavation, archaeologists stumbled upon an unexpected chamber. They found that this chamber was the largest part of the tomb complex, and were confronted with an unimaginable scene. Over 8,000 soldiers made of fired clay, perfectly arranged to continue Qin Shi Huang's immortal rule after his death. The terracotta army soldiers were designed with unique heights and faces. As archaeologists continued their work, they found other statues in different rooms. Chariots with drivers and harnesses, ministers, servants, and even musicians and jesters meant to entertain Qin Shi Huang in his eternal sleep. Each of these was accompanied by clay-made musical instruments, horses, weapons, armor, and various items. So far, only about 8,000 of them have been uncovered and displayed. But many more continue to be found underground every day. The construction of this tomb complex, considered the largest in world history, employed over 700,000 workers. However, there is a secret about the emperor's tomb that is not easy to bear. The tomb was not only constructed with building materials. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese people, forced to work under harsh conditions and starvation, fell exhausted and died. And their bodies were mixed into the mortar to be used as part of the tomb. Some were lucky enough to be buried in mass graves. It was an overwhelmingly oppressive power. So if Qin Shi Huang's tomb is like this, what was his life like? History shows the year 246 BC. There is no unified Chinese state yet. Instead, there are 7 kingdoms fighting for dominance. One of these kingdoms, the Qin dynasty, is led by a 13-year-old boy. This child, who will not escape trouble until he grows up, will experience his first disaster through his mother. His mother had smuggled a man named Lao Ai into the palace disguised as a eunuch, and this ambitious lover attempted a coup against Qin Shi Huang. However, Qin Shi Huang had learned of the plot in advance and suppressed the coup. He had his mother's lover tied to horses and had his limbs torn off while still alive, and buried everyone involved in the coup, along with their families, alive. His mother was locked in a palace room from which she would never escape. After these events, Qin Shi Huang, believing he had proven his authority to his army and people, had one goal: to unite the other 6 kingdoms under one roof and establish a unified Chinese state. He quickly gathered over 1 million young men from his people to create the largest army the ancient world had ever seen. Forming an army was not enough. He trained these ordinary peasants into professional units. The 6 kingdoms that could not resist Qin Shi Huang fell one by one. Finally, the Yan state, realizing it would be defeated, came with a peace offer. The kingdom sent an envoy to Qin Shi Huang for a diplomatic discussion. The envoy entered the king's audience room with a map of the lands and an agreement text. He unfolded the map and drew out a poisoned dagger to stab Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang was a skilled soldier. He escaped the dagger with his cloak and then killed the assassin on the spot with his sword. He issued a great order: destroy the Yan kingdom, plunder its lands, kill all its officials, execute its soldiers. Anyone who tries to flee, tear them apart along with their families. During this period, a famous musician, who was a close friend of the assassin, had sworn to avenge his friend. He planned to infiltrate a music performance in the palace and kill Qin Shi Huang while showcasing his art. Gao, a guard of Qin Shi Huang, noticed the plan. The emperor was not willing to kill such a talented musician and ordered him to continue with the music performance under his watchful eyes. He even congratulated the musician after the performance. After more than a decade of invasions, Qin Shi Huang succeeded in bringing all 6 other kingdoms under his rule and united the state under a single banner, establishing the unified Qin state. Today, we call this state China. The name of the state comes from here. He had succeeded in inscribing his name in history as the first emperor of China. But uniting the lands under one banner was just the first step. To become a single nation, more was needed. Therefore, he reorganized the diverse alphabets used throughout the Chinese Empire and created a common Chinese alphabet. He developed a common calendar and standardized weights, currencies, and prices. He even set the width of the chariots to the same standard to ensure uniform transportation on Chinese roads. Additionally, to prevent the reunification of other dynasties and to make national control more orderly, he established a system of provinces and counties. He divided the country into 36 provinces governed by governors, and further subdivided these provinces into counties, thus transforming his empire into a true state. Despite being a ruthless ruler, merit was one of Qin Shi Huang's most important characteristics. He did not hesitate to appoint meritorious scientists and ministers, even if they were citizens of enemy countries, to lead projects. He changed the existing aristocratic family-based system to a merit-based promotion system, emphasizing education and skills. All his cruelty aside, he was a capable ruler, and he had proven it. Of course, the support of the extraordinarily talented diplomat, philosopher, and the emperor's prime minister, Li Si, was also crucial. Li Si was the one who provided advice and was the brain behind many initiatives. Li Si was quite an interesting person. One day, he observed that the rats in the toilet were weak and hungry, while the rats in the stable were well-fed and plump. Upon realizing this, he concluded that since everyone's life is different, there is no set standard for honor. People's values are shaped by their social environment. Just as with the rats, human lives are also dependent on the random life events surrounding them. Therefore, rather than tying morality to strict codes, it is more correct to enable people to do their best, according to their environmental conditions. These thoughts deeply affected Qin Shi Huang, and Li Si continued to serve as prime minister until the end of the empire. Emperor Qin Shi Huang undertook one of the greatest architectural projects in Chinese history, and succeeded in increasing the country's agricultural productivity 5-fold. The vast project, which involved over 1 million workers, resulted in the development of agricultural lands that remain among China's most fertile to this day. However, the empire's problems were far from over. A power from Central Asia proved to be almost impossible to contend with due to its severity and ruthlessness: the Turks and Mongols. Turkish and Mongol raids from Central Asia had been causing significant damage to the border regions for hundreds of years. These people were swift riders and skilled archers from the harsh climates of Asia. It was impossible for Chinese soldiers to deal with them. The invaders were children of the steppes. While one group of raiders pillaged in the north of the country, many independent Turkish and Mongol groups were ravaging and plundering the border towns in the south and other regions. Previous dynasties had tried to address these threats by forming alliances with the Turks through marriage or by granting various privileges to prevent raids. A bitter example of this is a poem left by a Chinese princess. My family married me off to someone from a distant corner of the world. I was sent to a wild country. My palace is a round tent made of felt. My only food is dried meat. I constantly think of my homeland. My heart is breaking. I wish I could be the yellow swan returning home. The harsh warriors from Central Asia even left Qin Shi Huang feeling helpless. However, he viewed actions such as granting privileges or forming marital alliances as a form of insult. He was planning something more substantial and permanent. A colossal wall that would encircle the country from end to end was to be built. The largest man-made structure in history. Constructed with blood and sweat, the Great Wall of China. Before Qin Shi Huang, previous dynasties had constructed smaller walls. These were only effective against each other in limited ways. Now, a much larger and stronger wall was needed. The emperor demolished most of the old walls and forced millions of Chinese to work on this massive project. His slogan was, "Build and continue." Over 3 million people worked on the construction of the Great Wall, and 1 million people lost their lives during its building. The wall featured 10,000 towers, which were used both for soldiers' quarters and signaling purposes. Each flag raised by the soldiers in these towers indicated 500 approaching enemies. Qin Shi Huang was not just building a wall, he also had new cities constructed in the desolate areas of the wall to serve as outposts. There were always more than 1.5 million soldiers stationed along the wall, with supply and logistics managed through tremendous engineering and organization. Workers started at dawn and worked through heavy construction conditions until midnight. Due to hunger and extreme working conditions, many workers either died or committed suicide. The dead were not wasted. Their bodies were mixed into the mortar of the wall. Key sections of the wall were built wide and high enough to allow chariots to pass, and were adorned with temples and palaces. The purpose of the Great Wall was not only to protect against Turkish and Mongol invasions, it also aimed to demonstrate the unification of the country. Exile punished officials, penalized those for heavy labor, and prevent escapes. During an attack, captured enemies were either burned or thrown from the walls, or hurled at the enemy with catapults to create psychological pressure. The 20 dynasties that followed continued to add to the Great Wall until the 17th century. However, Qin Shi Huang faced other problems as well. The Confucian teachings embraced by the Chinese people could lead them to question the ruler's decrees and interpret the ruler as a servant of the people. This philosophy challenged the emperor's absolute power and was contrary to Qin Shi Huang's administrative philosophy. To establish a stronger central authority, Qin Shi Huang decided to adopt legalism, the philosophy of law, instead of Confucianism. Both philosophies had their pros and cons. Confucianism allowed more autonomy for local governments, while legalism was focused on strengthening central authority. Qin Shi Huang ordered the burning of all books in this direction. Those who delayed this order or hid books were to be exiled or buried alive. The emperor's greatest obsession was immortality. Like Alexander the Great and later Genghis Khan, all great kings shared this common thought. I have obtained everything. I am as powerful as a god. Now I must find immortality, he declared. For this reason, he summoned wizards claiming to have discovered the elixir of life from around the world. He demanded that they prove their claims of immortality. Sometimes, he would test their claims by having them buried alive. Qin Shi Huang had come across information in ancient alchemical texts suggesting that alchemists lived for thousands of years. This led him to the idea of adding mercury to the wine he drank, which seriously harmed his health. One alchemist told him that living unseen by anyone could protect him from evil spirits and grant immortality. As a result, Qin Shi Huang had underground passages constructed between his 200 palaces in different cities to lead a secretive life. His quest for immortality had driven him to such a paranoid existence. With his 200 palaces and incredible obsession linked by underground passages, Qin Shi Huang encountered a rumor in 211 BC. It was claimed that a meteorite had fallen in the lower parts of the Yellow River, and that it was a prophecy of the emperor's death. Qin Shi Huang sent a diplomat to investigate the situation. The meteorite fall was real, but the prophecy needed to be eliminated. All the people in the area where the event occurred were killed, and the meteorite fragments were collected and turned into dust. A year later, in 210 BC, Qin Shi Huang died in his palace due to the exhaustion from years of rule and the mercury in his wine. He was 49 years old at the time of his death. He had created a power like the Chinese Empire and changed the world forever. He would be remembered as a ruler who carried out two of the greatest architectural engineering projects in history and caused nearly 10 million deaths. There are those who claim that what is said about him is based on legends, but today we know that most of it is true. Qin Shi Huang was one of the most ruthless, but also one of the greatest rulers in history. Now, he lies in eternal sleep in the massive tomb he commissioned, and 2,000 years later, he sleeps under the awestruck gaze of people. That's all for today's topic. If you liked the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts and ideas for the next video in the comments. Take good care of yourselves. And see you in the next video.